Mountain Man went to buy horses, saw a woman on the fence and bought her instead. The Mountain Man had been awake since before dawn. The air up in the high country was sharp and cold, cutting through the thick logs of his cabin and settling deep into his bones. He moved quietly, the way a man does when he has lived alone for many years. His boots were worn, his jacket patched in places, but everything he owned had a purpose. Nothing was extra. Nothing was soft. He saddled his old truck just as the first pale light touched the peaks. The road down the mountain was long, rough, and lonely, but today he had a reason to travel it. Winter had been hard, and he needed strong horses for hauling wood and checking distant fences. His old mare was slowing down, and the mountains showed no mercy to weakness. The livestock auction in the valley was the only place within 100 miles where he might find what he needed. As the truck rattled down the dirt road, he thought about nothing in particular. He was not a man who wasted time on memories. The past had already taken enough from him. He focused on the road, the turns he knew by heart, and the steady hum of the engine. The mountains slowly gave way to open land, and the air grew warmer, heavier, louder. By the time he reached the auction grounds, the sun was high. The place was crowded with people, ranchers, traders, families, and curious onlookers. Voices blended into a constant noise of bargaining, laughter, and shouted prices. Animals filled the pens, horses stamping the dirt, cattle shifting restlessly, dust rising with every movement. The Mountain Man parked at the edge and sat still for a moment, adjusting to the chaos. He stepped out and walked toward the pens, his tall frame and quiet presence making him stand out without him trying. People noticed him and then looked away. There was something about him, maybe the way he watched more than he spoke, or the way his eyes missed nothing. He moved slowly along the rows, studying the horses with a careful, practiced eye. He checked their legs, their breathing, the set of their shoulders. Some were strong, some tired, some overpriced. He nodded at a seller here, exchanged a few words there, but nothing caught his interest. Too young, too weak, too nervous. Time passed and the sun climbed higher. He told himself he would leave if he didn't find the right animals by noon. There was no point staying in a place like this longer than necessary. That was when he noticed her. She was not near the pens or the auction ring. She sat on a broken wooden fence at the far edge of the grounds, half hidden by old wagons and stacked equipment. At first glance, she looked like someone waiting for a ride, but something about her stillness made him stop. She wasn't watching the animals or the crowd. Her eyes were fixed on the dirt at her feet. He didn't know why he looked again, but he did. The woman was young, but her face carried a tiredness that didn't match her age. Her clothes were plain and worn, as if they had been mended too many times. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers clenched together. People passed nearby, but no one spoke to her. No one seemed to notice her at all. The Mountain Man felt a strange unease. He told himself it was nothing. This place was full of hard stories. He turned back toward the horses, but his focus was gone. His eyes kept drifting toward that fence. After a while, he finished checking the last row and found himself walking in her direction without fully deciding to do so. He stopped a few steps away, keeping his distance. Up close, he could see faint marks of exhaustion in her posture, the way her shoulders sloped forward as if carrying an invisible weight. "You waiting for someone?" he asked, his voice low and steady. She looked up, startled, as if she hadn't expected anyone to speak to her. Her eyes were wary but not rude. "Yes," she said after a moment, then she hesitated. I think so," he nodded, not pressing. Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. He was used to quiet. Finally she spoke again, almost as if the words had been trapped for too long. "You buying horses?" she asked. "That was the plan," he replied. She gave a small, humorless smile. "That's what most folks come here for." He studied her carefully, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but with the same attention he gave to animals or land. Something about her didn't belong here, not in the usual way. She wasn't selling anything. She wasn't bidding. She was simply waiting. "Are you all right?" he asked. She hesitated again, her eyes flicked toward the crowd, then back to him. "I will be," she said quietly, "soon enough." The answer didn't satisfy him, but he didn't push. He knew better than most that people spoke when they were ready, not when they were questioned. He leaned against the fence, keeping a respectful distance. They talked in small pieces. She told him she had come to the auction with people who promised work, but things hadn't turned out the way she was told. Money was involved, papers she didn't fully understand, promises that changed shape once she had no way to leave. She didn't say everything, and he didn't ask for details that weren't offered. What struck him was not her story, but the way she spoke about it. There was no drama, no anger, just a tired honesty. A person worn down by circumstances rather than broken by them. He thought of the horses again. Strong bodies, measured worth, prices shouted across the ring. He had spent his life buying and selling what was needed to survive. But this felt different. This felt wrong in a way he couldn't easily explain. A bell rang in the distance, signaling another round of bidding. The noise grew louder. He glanced toward the pens, then back at her. "If you don't mind me asking," he said slowly, "what happens when the auction's over?" She swallowed. "I go where they tell me to," she answered. Something settled heavily in his chest. He thought about the mountain, the long winters, the quiet mornings, the work that never ended. He thought about how empty his cabin felt some nights, even with the fire burning. He had never planned for anything beyond survival. He had never allowed himself to want more. "I came here to buy horses," he said, almost to himself. She nodded, not sure why he was telling her that. "But sometimes," he continued, "you see something that matters more than what you planned." She looked at him now, really looked, as if trying to understand what kind of man stood in front of her. The mountain man straightened, decision forming not in haste, but with the calm certainty he used when facing storms or wild land. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing clearly. This trip was already not going the way he expected, and somehow that felt like the most honest beginning he'd had in years. The noise of the auction faded behind them as the mountain man and the woman remained near the broken fence. People moved past, busy with their own business, unaware that something quiet but important was unfolding at the edge of the grounds. The mountain man did not rush. He had lived long enough to know that real choices did not need loud words. He asked her name. She gave it after a pause, her voice steady but careful. Names, she said, had been used against her before. He respected that honesty. When she asked for his, he told her simply, without adding stories or titles. He was just a man from the mountains. That was enough. They spoke slowly in pieces, like two people testing thin ice. She explained more about how she had ended up there. She had answered an offer that promised steady work and a place to stay. She had been young, tired of moving from one uncertain place to another, and eager to believe someone who spoke with confidence. At first, things seemed fine. Then rules changed. Debts appeared where none had been mentioned. Leaving suddenly became impossible without paying a price she did not have. The mountain man listened without interruption. His face showed little, but inside, something burned quietly. He had seen unfairness before. He had seen men take advantage of land, animals, and other people when they thought no one would stop them. He had learned long ago that anger alone changed nothing. Action did. She told him she had been brought to the auction not to participate, but to wait. Someone else was deciding her next step. She didn't know where she would go by nightfall, only that she had no real say in it. Saying the words out loud seemed to cost her strength. When she finished, she looked away, embarrassed by her own honesty. He did not pity her. That was important to him. Pity weakened people, respect strengthened them. "You didn't choose this," he said simply. She nodded. "No, but I still have to live with it." He studied the ground, then the distant hills beyond the auction grounds. They were low compared to his mountains, but still familiar enough to remind him of home. He thought about the work waiting for him there, fences to mend, animals to care for, days that began before sunrise and ended after dark. It was hard work, but it was honest. No hidden rules, no shifting promises. He asked her what kind of work she knew. The question surprised her. "I can work," she said quickly, as if afraid he might doubt it. "I can cook, clean, help with animals. I learn fast." "I don't doubt that," he replied. They sat in silence again. The bell rang once more, calling buyers back to the ring. He knew the time was passing. Decisions at places like this were often made quickly, without thought for consequences. That was how people ended up trapped. Finally, he spoke. "I can't tell you what to do," he said, "but I can make you an offer." She turned to him, guarded again. "What kind of offer?" "There's a ranch in the mountains," he explained. "Remote, hard land, honest work, no tricks, no debts. If you choose to come, you'd be free to leave whenever you want." She searched his face for signs of deception. She had learned to do that well, but what she saw unsettled her more than smooth talk ever could. There was no eagerness there, no demand, just a man stating facts. "And what do you get?" she asked carefully. He answered without hesitation. "Help, company when the days get long, someone to share the work, nothing more than that." She looked down at her hands again. The offer sounded too simple, too clean. Life had taught her to distrust anything that sounded like safety. "What about the people who brought me here?" she asked. "They won't just let me go." He nodded. "I figured as much." He told her he had some savings, not much but enough, enough to settle what needed settling. Enough to close this chapter cleanly. He made it clear, very clear, that money would not tie her to him, it would only open the door. "You owe me nothing," he said. "Not time, not loyalty, not gratitude." Her throat tightened. No one had spoken to her like that in a long time. She asked him why he would do this for someone he had just met. He took a moment before answering. "Because I know what it's like to be stuck in a place you didn't choose," he said, "and because I can help." The simplicity of the answer left no room for argument. The sun began to tilt westward. Shadows stretched across the dirt. The auction would end soon. Whatever decision she made would follow her for years. She stood up slowly from the fence. Her legs trembled, not from weakness but from the weight of choice. She walked a few steps away, needing space to think. The mountain man did not follow. He watched from a distance, giving her what little control he could. She thought about staying, about following the path already laid out for her, familiar in its unfairness. She thought about leaving with a stranger into unknown mountains. Both paths frightened her, but one held a quiet promise she had not felt in a long time. She returned to him. "I don't know if I can trust this," she said honestly. "You don't have to trust me forever," he replied. "Just enough to get out of here." She took a deep breath. "All right." The word felt heavy but also freeing. They walked together toward the office where deals were finalized. He handled the conversations firmly, calmly, without raising his voice. Money changed hands. Papers were signed. No celebration, no drama, just the closing of a door. When they stepped back outside, the auction grounds felt different. The noise was the same, but for her the weight had lifted slightly. She was not owned. She was not promised. She was simply leaving. The mountain man headed toward his truck, the woman walking beside him. The horses remained in their pens. He did not look back. The road ahead was long, rough, and uncertain. But for the first time that day, it led away from waiting on a fence and toward a future neither of them had planned, but both were willing to face. The drive away from the auction grounds was quiet. Dust rose behind the truck as the noise and chaos slowly disappeared. The woman sat in the passenger seat, her hands folded in her lap, watching the road stretch ahead. Every mile felt unreal, as if she might wake up and find herself still sitting on that broken fence. The mountain man drove with steady focus. He did not try to fill the silence. He understood that some moments needed space to settle. The land changed as they moved farther from the valley. Buildings became fewer. Fields gave way to hills. The air grew cooler, cleaner. After a long while she spoke. "I've never been this far north," she said softly. "It's colder," he replied. "Harder but quieter," she nodded. Quiet sounded like safety to her. They stopped once for fuel and supplies. He paid for everything without comment. She offered to carry bags to help, but he didn't rush her. He treated her like someone who belonged there, not like a burden. That small detail stayed with her more than any words. As they climbed higher into the mountains, the road narrowed. Trees closed in, tall and dark, their branches brushing the sky. Snow still clung to the shaded ground, even though spring had touched the lower land. The truck worked hard, but the mountain man knew every turn. This was his world. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun was sinking behind the peaks. The cabin stood alone in a wide clearing, built from thick logs, smoke curling gently from the chimney. A small barn sat nearby, weathered but solid. Fences traced the land like quiet lines of care. She stepped out of the truck and breathed deeply. The air felt sharp in her lungs but clean. There was no crowd, no noise, no waiting eyes. "This is it," he said. She looked around slowly. It was rough, simple. Nothing about it was easy, but nothing about it felt false. He showed her the cabin. Inside it was warm, tidy, and practical. A fire burned low in the stone hearth. There were 2 rooms. He explained where she could sleep, where food was kept, how water was drawn. He did not hover. He did not instruct more than necessary. "You can rest," he said. "We'll talk about work tomorrow." That night she lay awake on the narrow bed, listening to the wind outside and the soft crackle of the fire. Fear still lived in her chest, but it was quieter now. The fear of harm was slowly being replaced by the fear of hope. Morning came early in the mountains. Light slipped through the small window, pale and cold. She rose quickly, unsure of expectations. When she stepped outside, the mountain man was already working, splitting wood with calm rhythm. She offered to help. He handed her a smaller task, showing her how to stack the pieces so they would dry properly. He explained things patiently, without judgment. When she made a mistake, he corrected it gently. Each small success built something inside her. Days passed like this. Work filled the hours, feeding animals, mending fences, cleaning, cooking simple meals. The labor was hard but honest. At night they ate together in quiet comfort. Sometimes they spoke of practical things, sometimes not at all. Trust did not arrive suddenly. It grew slowly like the grass pushing through cold soil. She learned his habits. He rose before dawn. He checked the land daily. He spoke little, but when he did, his words mattered. She noticed that he always asked before assuming, that he never stood too close, that he respected her space as if it were a rule written into the mountains themselves. One evening, as snow began to fall lightly, she asked him a question that had been sitting in her heart. "Why do you live so far from everyone?" she asked. He stared into the fire for a long moment. "Because it's honest," he said. "Out here, nothing pretends to be what it is." She understood that more than he knew. Weeks passed. Her hands grew stronger, her steps more confident. She laughed once, surprised by the sound of it. He noticed, and something in his chest eased. One afternoon, while repairing a fence together, she slipped on icy ground. He caught her arm quickly, steadying her. For a moment they were close. He released her at once, stepping back. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes," she said, breathless, not from the fall, but from the sudden realization that she was safe enough to be startled by kindness. That night she sat by the window, watching the moon rise over the peaks. She realized she had not thought about running in days, not because she was trapped, but because she had begun to choose to stay. The mountain man stood outside, looking over his land, feeling something unfamiliar settle into his life. Responsibility mixed with quiet hope. He had not planned for this change, but he was no longer alone in the silence. Neither of them said it out loud, but both understood the truth forming between them. This was not rescue. This was rebuilding. And in the stillness of the mountains, with winter slowly loosening its grip, 2 lives moved forward, carefully, honestly, and together, one steady day at a time. Spring arrived slowly in the mountains like a careful promise. Snow melted in narrow lines, feeding the streams that cut through the land. The mornings were still cold, but the air carried a softer feeling now. The woman noticed these changes before she noticed them in herself. She was changing too, piece by piece, without fear pushing her forward. Her days followed a steady rhythm. She woke early, helped prepare breakfast, and stepped outside with purpose. The work no longer felt strange. Her hands knew what to do. She could tell when an animal needed attention, when a fence post was loose, when the weather was about to turn. The mountains taught her quickly, and she listened. The mountain man watched these changes quietly. He never praised loudly, but his trust showed in small ways. He left more decisions to her. He asked for her opinion about the land. When something needed fixing, he worked beside her, not ahead of her. That mattered more than compliments. One afternoon, a storm rolled in faster than expected. Dark clouds swallowed the sky and the wind rose sharply. They were far from the cabin, checking a distant fence line. Rain turned to sleet, stinging their faces. Without panic, the mountain man signaled her toward a sheltered ravine he knew well. They waited there as the storm passed, the sound of wind echoing around them. She realized then how much she trusted him, not because he was strong, but because he stayed calm. He never made her feel small or dependent. He simply knew what to do. When the storm ended, they walked back in silence, soaked but steady. That night, as they sat near the fire drying their clothes, she spoke about her past more openly than before. Not every detail, just enough. He listened without interruption, without judgment. When she finished, he nodded once. "You're not that place anymore," he said. Those words settled deep in her chest. As weeks passed, the land came alive. Birds returned. Grass pushed through frozen soil. The woman planted a small garden near the cabin, something she had never had the chance to do before. Watching the first green shoots appear gave her a sense of future she had long forgotten. The mountain man noticed the way she smiled when she worked the soil. He noticed how she stood taller now, how her voice carried strength. He also noticed something else, how the cabin no longer felt empty when he came inside at night. Still, he kept his boundaries. He never assumed, never crossed a line. Respect was the foundation he refused to weaken. One evening, after a long day, she handed him a cup of coffee and sat across from him. "You know I can leave any time," she said. He met her gaze. "I know. I'm not staying because I owe you." "I know that too," she nodded. Saying it out loud mattered. Choice mattered. Later that night, she stood outside alone, watching the stars fill the sky. She felt strong, independent, and something more connected. Not owned, not saved, just present. The mountain man joined her, standing a few steps away. They shared the sky without speaking. There was no rush, no pressure, just two people allowing space for something real to exist. Days turned into months. The work continued. The seasons shifted. And without either of them naming it, trust became something solid beneath their feet. Both knew life would never be easy in the mountains, but it would be honest, and that, they had learned, was enough. As spring settled fully into the land, the woman realized something important. She had not been given a new life. She had built one. And the mountain man, watching the land and the woman who now walked it with confidence, understood that the greatest strength was not in surviving alone, but in choosing, freely and carefully, to walk forward together. Summer arrived fully in the mountains, bringing long days and clear skies. The land looked different now, open, alive, steady. The woman stood on a small rise near the cabin one morning, watching sunlight move across the fields. She felt rooted in a way she never had before. Not tied down, not trapped, rooted by choice. Her work had become confident and skilled. She handled tasks without being asked. She planned ahead, noticed problems early, and solved them calmly. The animals responded to her gentle firmness. The garden she planted was thriving, rows of green standing strong against the mountain wind. Each small success reminded her that she was capable, that her future was something she shaped with her own hands. The mountain man noticed everything. He noticed how she moved across the land as if it belonged to her, how she laughed more freely, how her eyes no longer searched for danger at every sound. He did not claim credit for these changes. He knew better. Healing did not come from being saved. It came from being respected. One afternoon, a neighbor rode in from miles away. Visitors were rare, and the woman felt a brief flicker of old fear. The mountain man sensed it and spoke calmly, introducing her by name, by role, by choice. He made it clear she was there because she wanted to be. The neighbor nodded, respectful, and spoke to her as an equal. When he left, the fear faded like a shadow passing. That evening, she thanked him. "For what?" he asked. "For the way you speak about me," she said. "Like I belong here." "You do," he replied simply. "If you choose to," she smiled, not because the words were new, but because they were true. As summer deepened, they shared more moments, repairing the barn roof, carrying water from the stream, resting in the shade after long hours of work. Sometimes they talked about the future. Sometimes they spoke of nothing at all. Silence between them had become a comfort, not a warning. One night, a strong wind moved through the valley, rattling the cabin walls. The woman woke suddenly, heart racing from a dream she could not fully remember. She stepped outside to breathe, to steady herself. The mountain man was already there, checking the land by moonlight. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded. "Just an old memory." He stood nearby, not too close. "They lose their grip," he said gently, "over time." She looked at him, really looked, and realized how much had changed. The fear that once ruled her decisions had loosened its hold. She was no longer running from something. She was standing for something. Days later, she made a choice of her own. She asked him to teach her more about managing the land, about planning for winter, about decisions he once made alone. He agreed without hesitation. Teaching her did not make him smaller. It made the work lighter. They began to plan together, not promises, not labels. Just plans, practical, honest, flexible, the kind that could change if life demanded it. As summer edged toward fall, the woman traveled to town alone for supplies. It was her idea. The mountain man supported it without question. When she returned, she felt proud, not because she had proven anything to him, but because she had proven something to herself. That night, they sat outside watching the sky fade from blue to gold. She spoke first. "I know I can leave," she said again. He nodded. "I know. I'm not staying because I'm afraid to go." He met her eyes. "I know that too." She took a steady breath. "I'm staying because this life feels honest, because I feel strong here, because I choose it." The mountain man did not rush to answer. When he did, his voice was calm, steady, certain. "Then you're welcome," he said, "every day." The wind moved gently through the grass. Somewhere nearby, an animal called softly. Life continued, steady and real. Looking back, the woman understood something clearly. No one had bought her. No one had claimed her. What had happened at the auction was not ownership. It was an ending. The end of being treated like a thing. The end of waiting on a fence for someone else to decide her life. What the mountain man had paid for was freedom. And what she had built afterward was dignity. The mountain man, standing beside her, understood his own truth. He had gone to buy horses because that was what survival demanded. But he had returned with something far more valuable, not possession, not control, but partnership and purpose. As autumn approached, the mountains stood quiet and strong around them. Two lives, once shaped by hardship and isolation, now moved forward with care and choice. Not rescued, not owned, just shared. And in that honest, hard-earned future, both found something they had never planned for, but were finally ready to keep.